walking out the crevice into the cavern. The Changus spotted her and lunged against its cage yet again, hissing frantically. The horseman dismounted in a single leap and seized her. Grasping her by the wrists, they stretched her arms out and dragged her to Lignar Dre. The great beast roared in a victorious rave. The spectator across the water, whose face had now begun to resemble that of a horseman, bowed out into the shadows. With her back to the dragon, Andi raised her eyes as an ominous silence commanded the moment. They arrived on the shape of a man in an oversized grey hooded robe who seemed to materialize out of the shadows. He withdrew his hood just so, revealing only his nose and mouth and the appalling skin that comprised them, reminiscent of shriveled reptilian scales. Andi gasped as a terror she'd never known gripped her. The sheer presence of the fabled devil stole her breath. She surprised herself with the tone of angst she used in speaking the name. It simply dropped out of her mouth in a murmur. Delicious. She locked her gaze upon the phantom-like figure, while awareness sharpened into focus. The decision she made to reveal herself would indeed cost her her life. The sudden comprehension shook her. "Jake, help me," she cried in a regretful plea. Dearest memories of parents and siblings raced to the forefront of her mind. Convulsing violently, she pulled, twisted, and contorted every which way in an attempt to escape, to no avail. "No, please," she bawled out in tears. Her thoughts returned to the field where she and Derek were rescued from Lignar Dre. "Jesus, please," she cried out. "God help me." Felicia spoke out in a repulsive, rasping voice.
"Be done with her. We have what we needed her for. Rid the boy as well. He is with her."
Before the words could leave his mouth, Derek stormed out of the cave with his blade drawn. "Over my dead body, you sick, ugly toad," he yelled. His emergence elicited renewed tenacity within Andi and had her captors loosening their grips on her wrists. With one tremendous heave, she broke free of both their holds, then tumbled to the ground several feet away. She quickly stood to her feet and then waited for someone to move toward her. Delicious turned to Lignar Dre.
"Breathe henceforth thy fire,"
he bellowed.
"Mount me, for it is nearly finished. The Atlas is complete and its power is finally mine. Feast now, my pet."
The dragon's neck reeled around and its jaws swept down after Andi. "Derek!" the Changus Andi yelled, jumping and stumbling out of the way while Lignar Dre's jaws snapped once after her, then twice. Enjoying the game, Lignar Dre raised its head towards the cavern and heaved a bellowing length of fire that blanketed the ceiling of the cavern in its entirety. It came back around with renewed focus in its eyes. It gave off a partial roar, as if encouraging her to engage in the sport. Everyone froze, watching the great dragon work its strategy out with the prey. Andi stood, caught her footing, ran several steps to a horseman, and drew a 12-inch blade from a sheath on his hip. The horseman had no intentions of interfering. The dragon let out a cry announcing the contest was underway. Andi stole a look over her shoulder, trying to ascertain how involved Delicious was with the Atlas. Realizing he'd paused his work for the entertainment, she grinned. She returned her attention to her enormous foe, while the grin she wore shrunk to a scowl.
"Let's go."
Her glare was returned by its snarl. She took a quick scan of the cavern while maintaining her role as challenger, blade held up in front of her. Her eyes landed on the mound of bones. The insignificance Delicious held for each of the lost lives tore at her. Her eyes arrived back on Lignar Dre. She felt the rising pressure of her gritted teeth as her thoughts swam to a recent place, one in which she felt insignificant. "I mean something to someone, do you get that?" she said. "They all meant something to someone," she screamed, pointing towards the bones. Her voice then fell to a firm, enraged tone. "And who are you to decide? And for what? We're all significant." She took a step forward and lifted the blade. "Do you hear me, you illegitimate murderer?" she yelled. "We all mean something to someone. We're all significant." A single tear arose in her right eye and spilled out. "With God as my witness, I'll see you dead before this is over," she said to the dragon, then turned and ran, cutting toward the lake. The dragon swept in swiftly. Andy took 3 long strides and then leapt off the ledge, turning her entire front side back towards the dragon, then threw the blade. The blade found its way into the beast's mouth and stuck itself in back of Lignor Dre's throat. Andy then glimpsed over at the crevice where Jake was. "Help me, Jake!" she cried, then plunged into the lake. Lignor Dre let out a furious wail and then followed her underwater descent with a heated blast of fire. It then thrashed its long neck around in an attempt to dislodge the object, which proceeded into a series of coughing snorts. Andy surfaced 20 feet away and then began to swim toward the other side in a sudden and powerfully fierce resolve. Refusing to allow her escape, the dragon snarled, extended its winged arms, and then leapt off the ledge in an attempt to snatch her from the water in its jaws. It soared quickly as it passed over Andy and then hurriedly circled back around. Suddenly, 2 marvelously looking, light-emitting arrows hit the dragon's right wing, disabling it, followed by 2 more on its left, sending the behemoth spiraling into the lake. The horsemen turned their attention to the direction from which the arrows came. 2 shimmering men stood on a high ledge with bows, reloading. Andy flipped around and immediately recognized them. "Yes!" she screamed, followed immediately by, "Oh no!" When she realized Lignor Dre's plunge was about to send a wave around the lake of massive proportion. The archers turned quickly and then took aim at the horsemen. Finally, Jake jumped out into the cavern and drew his combating blades. He delivered a powerful slash against the door of the Cengus' cage and then heaved it several yards through the air into the water. He then engaged one of the horsemen in a battle to the death. While he faced the one, the others used their blades and whips to knock the arrows from their lines of descent. Derek snuck his way to the edge overlooking the water in search of Andy. She was still swimming but was closing in on the opposite shore. She was 50 feet directly below Velicious. Derek glanced up and saw Velicious beginning to open a wormhole in the middle of the upper expanse of the cavern. Slipping behind one of the great horses methodically, he stopped when he bumped his head on a large crossbow. Jake did his best to keep his combatants back to the archers. Soon enough, the opposing horseman took an arrow, followed by 2 more, but kept fighting. Jake took his encounter to the lake's ledge, and when his opponent took his 5th arrow, he began to slow. Jake then maneuvered himself in such a way as to deliver a kick that sent the other fighter over the edge into the lake. One by one, Jake engaged the other horsemen, repeating his strategy, and one by one, they fell. Finally, there was only one horseman left, the leader, the one who wore a Viking helmet across his back. He was the biggest and by far the strongest of the riders. He'd already taken 1 arrow in the chest and another in either side, but wasn't showing any signs of letting up. Jake knew he was out of his league. His rival wouldn't allow his back to face the archers, and he meticulously continued to knock the arrows down one after the other, all the while wearing Jake down. From its lower position in the lake, the dragon caught sight of the skirmish between its loyalist and the betrayer, and then hissed horribly. Jake entered into a state of pain he never could have perceived. He clenched his fist and pounded his white knuckles into the soft, moist ground, while the pain splintered throughout his entire body, causing him to emit a shrill scream of panic. He doubled over, dropping his blades. He then tumbled to the ground in agony, pleading for a merciful death from his former cohort. The horseman stared down upon the conquered warrior and spit. Then he skipped over to his stallion, dodging the descending arrows, and unsheathed an enormous double-headed axe. He then bounded back to Jake, swinging the atrocious weapon around in an impressive maneuver so as to land a clean strike. As the axe swept through its final descent toward Jake, a thick, unusual arrow struck the horseman in the chest just below the neck. The horseman instantly halted, and the weight of the axe carried him several feet away. He stood frozen as 4 more of the shimmering archer's arrows struck him in the side and back. he dropped the axe. He looked up to see Derek just now lowering his aim with Jake's crossbow. Jake rolled around in pain, gnashing his teeth in a squealing whine, and then took notice of the dead horseman. While thrusting his head into the ground, he spotted the unrelenting dragon reeling in the water. Jake unsteadily stood to his feet and screamed through his agony.
You lose, you little...
But was cut off by a shrieking roar from Lignor Dre. The Cengus had finished with the horseman, now evidenced by several floating limbs, and had loosed its fury on the dragon. Lignor Dre whirled around and then began to sink, hissing and screeching. Belicious had nearly completed the gate. Derek watched as the rays of colored lights began to merge in a counterclockwise swirl. He quickly loaded another arrow, took aim at Belicious, and then fired. The two archers followed suit. Derek's arrow nicked Belicious in the arm. The other's arrows narrowly missed on account of his painful flinch. Belicious panicked, then leapt off the ledge into the gate and disappeared. Andy reached the ledge and just missed, grasping his cloak as he jumped. Derek saw one of the translucent men draw his arrow on Jake. He ran a few steps towards them, raising his hands frantically. No, no, you've got it all wrong. He's with us. The archer fired. The string on the bow snapped, launching the arrow into a piercing flight. Derek watched as it traveled the vast distance with speed, grace, and ease. A silence fell upon Derek as he realized he was too late. There was nothing he could do. The arrow took on an ice blue hue as it crossed the cavern. It struck Jake in the right shoulder. Jake dropped to the ground, holding himself up on all fours. Jake, Derek cried, rushing over to him.
I'm all right. The beast released its hold on me. We're no longer tethered. Get Andy and go before the gate closes.
Where's the arrow? We've got to get the arrow out right away.
Arrow?
He asked.
I'm afraid I don't know what you mean.
Derek searched his shoulder. There was no arrow, just as Jake had explained. Derek glanced back at the archers, who were both gone. He looked back at Jake. Jake, your face, it's changing. Some of your skin is coming back. That's great. Jake felt his face and found lips had begun to reform. He immediately took a fleeting look toward Andy, but when she stepped to the ledge Belicious had just leapt from, looking back at the two of them, he quickly hid his face from her, glancing down and away. His eyes shot to and fro as he considered the ramifications of what was happening. For the first time in months, he generated a happy thought. I'm released, he said to himself quietly. My God, I'm released. A droplet of water splashed onto his arm. Another followed. He paused for a moment, recalling the feeling of, tears, Derek, oh my God in heaven. He heard my prayer, he said, now sitting up with hands in his face, beginning to wail in a joy long forgotten. The film over his eyes started dissolving, leading to a burning he was no longer familiar with. Instinctively squeezing his eyes shut, he was surprised to find he had developed transparent, thin membranes, returning as eyelids with which to blink. All at once, what began with a moment of enlightenment ended with a titanic resurgence of emotions. His blubbering continued as he tried to iterate his matter to Derek, who was so amused with the display that he just watched endearingly with a grin. Derek, Andy called, is everything okay with Jake? He's fine, Derek answered in a laugh. The berries, do you have them? Derek looked at Andy incredulously. You gotta be kidding me. I don't know where they are. Come on, let's go. Andy turned around and saw a glassy sphere loaded with strategically placed jewels, all connected by white, almost indiscernible mapped lines. It was the Atlas. It sat on a rock-carved table just inside a passageway off the ledge. She began walking toward it in awe. It was beautiful. The line's white shimmer had Andy thinking in terms of controlled lightning, only on a much smaller scale, as in delicate thread. As the light passed through each particular gemstone, it emitted a brilliant glistening, which gave off the overall glassy effect. The other end of this is what we must have seen in that room, she said to herself. I bet he created a window here for that horseman to travel through in order to get to that horse. She raised a cynical eyebrow. Too bad it won't be there, she chuckled. She took a closer look at the gorgeous glimmering stones without getting too close out of respect for the white, vibrating lines. He doesn't have absolute power if I take one of those stones, she thought to herself. She took another step towards the atlas, then tripped and fell. She sat up and then rotated around to see what it was she'd kicked. It was a small bag. She tipped it toward her. Derek helped Jake to his feet. Jake studied Derek's eyes for a moment. So you're the one. Come again? I used to pray you'd never show up. To look back at those days from here, wow. I was such an inflated coward. And I'm betting that's how she saw me. He took one step back and was working on another. Listen, Derek, I can't ever thank you enough for... hold on a second. We're all in this together now, Derek interjected. You're coming too. Let's go. I can't go back like this. I'll stay here and go after... No! Derek interrupted again, but with more ferocity in his tone this time. It'll be okay. We've got to try. Jake shook his head, looking away. Derek frowned. Fine, I'm not going to twist your arm, but we've got to go. At least escort us to the gate that will get us home. Jake conceded, then whistled. His muscle-bound stallions sprinted to his side. Hop on, he said after swinging onto its back in a single grasp of its mane. Yeah, okay. Jake held out a hand and yanked Derek up, then pulled his fur hood over his head, hiding his face. Derek glared at him. She's already seen you, man. Jake paused. A thought stole his breath. He turned to Derek with a hopeful air about him. My phone, do you still... Here, Derek answered, pulling it out of his pocket. Jake tapped a few buttons, producing a holographic image of his family. He smiled gently and then safely tucked it into his garments. He leaned back toward Derek. Hold on, friend. The two were off in a sprint. They sped through a series of tunnels, ending up in front of Andy. You happen to get a good look at those two archers at all? She asked. Derek shook his head. One of them took a shot at Jake here, though. As soon as he spoke the words, he realized the archer had delivered a dose of something quite incredible. He glanced at Jake. You didn't feel it, did you? The arrow? It didn't hurt you. With his face hidden within the oversized hood, Jake began looking back at Derek but spotted Andy. Before the hooded opening could completely compromise him, he resumed his straightforward position, resigning himself to silence. Pulling empty hands out of her pockets, Andy frowned. We couldn't have done it without them. Derek nodded, looking down at Andy, and asked the more pressing question. Where are the berries? I'm sorry. I guess I lost them in the lake. She stepped up to Jake's leg and patted his knee. Jake, thank you so much. She covered her mouth while her eyes fell to the ground. A tender, breaking voice announced, I thought you were dead. She returned her tearful gaze to Jake. I can't imagine what you're going through right now, but I want you to know, Jake, that I know you're no longer that horrid thing. No matter what you look like, you'll always be my Jake. A quiet, awkward moment passed while she waited for any kind of reply. Andy switched her gaze to Derek. The beseeching expression she wore tugged at Derek's heart, kindling a tender response. She stepped away from Jake and toward Derek. He reached down and held her cheek with an open palm. His task-oriented grimace softened into a compassionate, welcoming grin. He stole a look at her lips and she took notice. She slid her eyes over to Jake and then quickly ran them back to Derek, tossing him a puckered kiss. Butterflies instantly ran amok throughout his stomach. The silent giggles were enough to motivate Jake. Come on, Andy, hop up, he said from under his hood. We have to jump through the gate. This gate isn't at full strength yet. It won't get you back. There's still a fragment of the one Derek arrived through yesterday. If we jump through this one, it should lead us to that one. Derek tapped him on the shoulder. Why do we need to go anywhere? Wasn't it right here in this cavern? I mean, because this is where I fell through. Not anymore. Where'd it go? If it was here, why isn't it still here? Derek asked. Beowulf took it with him earlier, along with Lig Nardre. He was trying to speed things up for Valicious. So where is it? Andy asked. Wherever Beowulf was last. Pradicus's house, Derek said. Beowulf was shot there by Pradicus. Jake quickly turned to Derek as if the words took him by surprise. He held his gaze for a moment. Derek then looked to Andy, wondering what the matter was about. Jake rotated back around. Derek reached down, clasped Andy's wrist, and then pulled her up. "Hold on," Jake said. The huge horse took a couple of galloping steps and then leapt into the gate.